in Pharmaceuticals in association with Higher Secondary Principals Forum.
Good day, students. Myself, Mrs. Shraddha Bandekar, teacher in English at Mushtifund Higher Secondary School, Cujira. So today we would be going to the fourth chapter from the supplementary reader, which is called The Enemy by Pearl S. Buck. Let us learn a little about the author, Pearl S. Buck. She was an American writer and novelist. She spent most of her life before 1934 in China. She began her writing career in 1930 with her first publication, East Wind, West Wind. Her novel, The Good Earth, was the best-selling fiction book in the United States in 1931 and 32. She won the Pulitzer Prize in 1932. In the year 1938, she was awarded the prestigious Nobel Prize in Literature for her rich and truly epic descriptions of peasant life in China and for her biographical masterpieces. The chapter that we would be learning today, The Enemy, was written by her and published in Harper's Magazine in 1942. It confirms her belief in equality for all people. Let us look at the different characters in the story. Dr. Sadao Hoki. He is a Japanese doctor who learned everything about medicine and surgery from America, and he works as a doctor for the Japanese army. His wife, Hannah Hoki, has also been to America. The next character is the one around whom the entire story revolves, Tom. He is an American prisoner of war who was washed up ashore in front of Dr. Sadao's house. He was wounded and unconscious when Dr. Sadao reaches him. The next character is the general. He is the general of the Japanese army. He is ailing and he only cares for himself. The next character is Yumi, who is the nanny at Dr. Sadao's house to look after the children. The sixth character is the gardener. He has been at Dr. Sadao's house since his childhood. He has been a specialist in moss and he had made one of the finest moss gardens in Japan for Sadao's father. The last character is the cook, and she has also been in the house since Sadao's childhood. So students, let us quickly go through the characters again. Dr. Sadao, he is a Japanese doctor who has learned everything about medicine and surgery from America. His wife, Hannah. Tom, the American prisoner. The Japanese general of the army. Yumi, the nanny to the children. The gardener, who is an elderly person. He has been around in the house since Sadao's childhood, and the cook too has been in the house since Sadao has been a child. Let us now look at the setting of the story. So the story is set in Japan, and most of the action takes place at Dr. Sadao's house, which is very close to the Japanese sea coast. Now the story simultaneously also has the Second World War as the background, which also culminates in dropping of atom bombs in places like Hiroshima and Nagasaki by America. So under these circumstances, an American sailor by no chance could be treated as a friend by the Japanese. The theme of the story, it has enmity between the two nations. So the story, The Enemy, portrays enmity between the two nations, Japan and America, in its background, and all the Americans are considered as enemies by the Japanese. But when an American prisoner of war is washed up before Sadao's house, Sadao is driven by the spirit of humanity and he tries to save his life. Let us now learn about the story. So the story opens with a flashback from Sadao's childhood, which immediately establishes his father's Japanese patriotism and belief in Japan's capacity for greatness. So students, despite the fact that Sadao's father is not living any longer, Pearl S. Buck has made an effort to create an image of Sadao's father as a nationalist of Japan. So Sadao's father is one image which portrays the patriotism of Japan. Sadao's identity and different duties that accompany those identities will be evident as the story progresses. As a Japanese citizen, he has to do whatever his country asks for him. And as a skilled surgeon, he has a duty to tend to his patients. Students, if you can see the picture here, this is exactly where Dr. Sadao's house was. It was very close to the Japan sea coast. Sadao lived in his house located near the shore with his wife, Hannah, children and servants. Hannah shows a deep love for Japanese customs and the old way of living, seen through her traditional house and her role as an obedient wife. She largely bends to Sadao's will, often without resentment, and upholds him as the head of the household. So here you find that Sadao's wife Hannah is someone who is very much dedicated to her husband. For her, she considers her husband to be the head of the house and she surrenders to every wish of his dutifully. The cook and the elderly gardener were servants who had been in the house since long. The cook is critical of her young master, implying that she is more loyal to Sadao's father even though he is dead. The gardener too has been an instrumental part of the household ever since Sadao was just a boy. He is fiercely loyal to Sadao's father, who is dead at the outset of the story. Students, I want you to pay attention to these two characters, the cook and the gardener. You find that these two who are already old, who have been in the house since Sadao's childhood, are trying to tell us that the generation gap, there has been quite a bit of generation gap between the cook, the gardener and Dr. Sadao. And that is the reason why the cook seems to be critical of her young master. That is the reason why the cook and the gardener are much more loyal to their first master, who is none other than Sadao's father. Yumi is also one of the servants at Dr. Sadao and Hannah's house. She largely tends to the children and is seen with them far more often than Hannah herself. So the couple had met at a university in America, but waited to fall in love until their parents back in Japan could properly approve and arrange for their marriage. Sadao's father was a Japanese nationalist who believed firmly in racial purity. Sadao could marry Hannah if she was purely Japanese. He followed the old Japanese way of doing things, seen by the way he properly arranged Sadao and Hannah's marriage. Although Sadao and Hannah were educated, they accepted and followed every decision taken for them by Sadao's father. So students, here you find that Dr. Sadao and Hannah have been educated people. They had been to America to study. Dr. Sadao is a surgeon, a very skilled surgeon who has returned all the way from America. So here you can understand that these two characters, Dr. Sadao and his wife, although they are educated, although they are learned, They are people who are grounded to their tradition and their roots, and that is precisely the reason why I have put these words in inverted commas. They waited to fall in love. So, they waited till they got acceptance from their family, and only when Sadao's father gave him a green signal is it that they decided to marry one another. So, while gazing out of his secluded property on the coast of Japan, Dr. Sadao Hoki noticed a strange shape crawling out from the ocean. Realizing it's a man, Sadao and his wife Hannah rushed out to the beach to help. They were shocked to realize the man, covered with blood, unconscious, was white and looked no older than 70. Now students, you can see the picture there. There is Dr. Sadao and his wife, and both of them are gazing out, and they can see that there is a shadow, there is someone who is crawling there. So you can understand that these two characters are so very much drifted with humanity that they would not forget to care less for the person who is out at the beach, and that is precisely the reason why they rushed. And when they went there, they saw that there was a person who was covered with blood, he was unconscious, and yes, they did realize that he was a white man. They were shocked to realize that the man covered with blood was unconscious. On examining, it was clear that there was a gunshot wound in the boy's back, the ominous red scars on his neck, and his US Navy hat. They deduced that he was a prisoner of war who had recently escaped from the Japanese authorities. So students, I told you about the setting. I told you that there was a war that was going on between America and Japan, and can you imagine during these circumstances there was an American who was washed at the shore close to Dr. Sadao's house as a doctor. It is his duty to save the patient, but as a Japanese, he knows that the white man is his enemy. So let us see what happens next. But Dr. Sadao does not stop examining the boy. He realizes that there is a gunshot on the boy's back, and let us see what he does next. Sadao, a famously skilled surgeon, couldn't help but put back the man's wound with sea moss to stop his bleeding, even while proclaiming his hatred for Americans. So like I told you, Dr. Sadao was dutifully bound to save the enemy. And what did he do? He could not find cotton there, so he took some sea moss and he tried to stop his bleeding. Sadao's divided loyalties as a surgeon compel him to save the man, and his expert fingers and trained hands seemed of their own will. Meanwhile, as a Japanese citizen, Sadao knew that he shouldn't have anything to do with the white man. So I already spoke about this. Sadao is kind of torn apart between two roles. First is his role that he is a doctor, and every doctor's responsibility is to save any life that is in danger. On the other hand, as a part of a Japanese citizen, because he is a Japanese citizen, it is his duty not to help his enemy, and we find that Dr. Sadao is torn apart between these two conflicts. Let's continue, students. Sadao and Hannah can't bear to turn the man over to the authorities, as they would surely kill him. But they can't leave him stranded out at the sea either. They know that bringing the man into their house is illegal and dangerous, an act that could deem them traitors and lead to their own arrest. So you can see the picture here. Dr. Sadao and his wife are both confused. They don't know what to do with this man. and they are very sure that they can't help him out, but they know that if they hand him over to the authorities in a state that he is right now, he is surely going to be killed. Even though the man is a political enemy, Hannah is concerned with doing the kindest thing for him, that is throwing him back into the sea rather than turning him over to police, while still protecting her own safety and that of her family. So students, here Hannah and Dr. Sadao are thinking in different ways. They know if they bring the enemy home, they will be termed as traitors. If they are termed as traitors, there could be chances that the Japanese authority might as well have Dr. Sadao and his wife arrested. But Hannah here wants to do the kindest thing even though the white man is her enemy. So you find here that Hannah also is torn apart between two conflicts. She wants to help out this injured man because she is a very kind lady, and on the other hand she doesn't want to hamper the image of her husband or her family by helping out the American. Let's see what they exactly come up to. After much deliberation, the couple decides to bring the wounded American into their house despite the risk. Sadao voices the conflict between his duty as a surgeon and his duty as a Japanese citizen. His status as a surgeon means that it is his responsibility to save lives whenever possible, even if that life has a foolish face and is an American. Hannah is supportive in her husband's decision, knowing the fact that it could cause trouble to all of them. So students, here you can know that Sadao has chosen his responsibility as a doctor to, he has rated his responsibility of a doctor at a higher level, and he decides to bring the wounded enemy home. And his wife Hannah has been extremely supportive, despite the fact that she is very much aware there could be trouble, there could be problems, there could be dawned on her as well as her husband, but she has married Dr. Sadao and she in no way wants to get away from him, be it in good or in bad deeds. So the American was given a perfectly preserved room which belonged to Sadao's father. His nationalistic sentiments have been preserved and seem to live on in the household. After properly examining the man, Sadao decided that he is surely going to die unless he undergoes surgery immediately. Sadao needed help and assistance in the task of carrying out the operation, and Hannah surrenders to the order of her husband. But they are still confused and do not know how to tackle this problem. Now, students, I would like to draw your attention here that the American was given a perfectly preserved room which belonged to Sadao's father. So I told you in the previous slides that Sadao's father was a Japanese nationalist, a person who wanted to keep Japan alive in his very household. He was the one who had a traditional marriage arranged for his son and daughter-in-law. So can you see the irony out here? The enemy himself is given the room of a Japanese nationalist or a person who has strong feelings towards Japan. And it is Dr. Sadao who comes down to the conclusion that he has to be operated, the American prisoner has to be operated, otherwise he is going to die, and it is Hannah, his wife, who surrenders to help him out in the process of carrying out the surgery. The American needs to be cleaned in order to be operated, and she orders the servant Yumi to do so. But Yumi has a clash of words and disobeys the order of her mistress. Hannah now decides to do the job herself and cleans the American just prior to the operation. Hannah's duty as a wife, and specifically the wife of a surgeon, tests the limits of what she can accept as she steps in as an obedient assistant. So what happens now is, before carrying out the operation, the American has to be cleaned, but Yumi is not willing to dirty her hands by cleaning the blood of an American, and so she tells her mistress that she will not agree to this order of hers and she is not going to clean the American. And Hannah feels that instead of taking favor from anyone, it is rather better that she does the job herself, because it is the need, it is a demand for her husband, and she surrenders to be the assistant in carrying out the surgery. Sadao's indifferent attitude towards the room that once belonged to his father tell us that he prioritizes his responsibility as a surgeon and the well-being of his patients. It is also significant to note that the expensive floor coverings in Sadao's father's room are now soaked with an American man's blood. So, Sadao is totally carried away with the operation, and he forgets that he is in a room, he is in his house and not his operation theatre. What happens in an operation theatre is, you have people who are going to come and do the cleaning, but since the operation is being carried out at home, maybe the expectation of the people in the house is that Dr. Sadao is a little more careful. But here Dr. Sadao is totally carried away by the responsibility of being a surgeon, and he is also worried about the well-being of his patients, and he forgets that he is staining the floor covers with the American man's blood. Sadao quickly loses himself in operation, talking to his patient and calling him my friend, as Sadao removes the bullet lodged in the boy's side. The surgery is messy and Hannah is forced to act as her husband's assistant. When she politely excuses herself to throw up, her husband is cold and unsympathetic, forgetting that she has never witnessed an operation before. The surgery is a success, but Sadao's actions reveal how torn he is about fulfilling his duties as a surgeon versus as a Japanese citizen. So students, as he is carrying out the operation, he happens to call the enemy my friend, and he gets the bullet out. Now the surgery is quite a messy job, and Hannah is not used to seeing so much of blood on daily basis, and she feels like puking. She rushes out of the room, but her husband shows no sympathy towards her. He kind of forgets that his wife is not his full-time assistant. She is not used to seeing so much of blood. The operation turns out to be a success, but Sadao again is confused. He is again torn up between two responsibilities. His responsibility as a surgeon, which he has carried out very successfully, but he might as well feel that he has been disloyal to his motherland. Let's continue. So Hannah treats the man tenderly while not liking him. So all this is happening after the operation is already over, and the American now requires care in order to come back to normal. So Hannah treats the man tenderly while not liking him, showing the conflicting impulse to be kind to a fellow versus the pull to see him as an enemy. So can you understand what a storm it must be in her head, because she is helping out a person who is her own enemy. Over the course of several days, the boy who introduces himself as Tom improves dramatically. So there is a lot of improvement that is seen in the enemy. He is warm and grateful, showering the surgeon and his wife with praise for saving his life. Sadao and Hannah always respond coldly, implying that they are still going to turn him over to the authorities. So, despite the fact that they have taken a stand to help the enemy, they are not giving the enemy any signal or sign of being any sympathetic towards him, but they are reminding him over and over again that he could be turned over to the authorities any moment. Now, the servants in the house have a different story to tell all of us. The servants are shocked at Sadao and Hannah's decision to help the white man. Their old master, Sadao's father, would have never done such a thing. Students, I just told you about the generation gap that exists between the older servants and Sadao. They have been in the house when Sadao was a small child, but they cannot be on terms with the decision that Sadao and his wife have taken to shelter an enemy in their house. On the seventh day, all of the servants quit. Even though two of them, the cook and the gardener, have been an instrumental part of the household since Sadao was just a little boy. So, many a times we feel that we are not taken in the right spirit by people who are older than us, and this problem exists because we are born in a different age group, we are born in a different setup, and the older generation comes from a different, they come from a different era altogether. So, here also the cook and the gardener fail to understand Sadao's difficulty, and they take a stand to leave the house on the seventh day. While Yumi is worried to leave the children, but Hannah politely thanks them for their service and pays them off. So, you can see here Hannah is not showing any response. She is extremely calm and composed despite there is so much that is happening in the house. Can you imagine, students, all the servants in her house have left. She will have to do the cooking, she will have to look after her children. There is so much more that she will have to do, along with the mental tension of an enemy that they are sheltering in their house. The servants' concerns are somewhat understandable, as they would perhaps be considered traitors and sentenced to jail or even death if Tom's presence were made known to the authorities. So, here the servants and their way of thinking is not considered wrong, because the servants are going to think of themselves. If by some means the authorities know that Sadao's family has sheltered an American, everybody will be taken to task, including the servants. And that is precisely the reason why they leave the house on the seventh day. Hannah's worries know no boundaries, as she fears that the servants might as well leak the news of the American to anyone or the authorities, which in turn would take her and her husband to jail. Now, there is a trust issue that Hannah has here. Although the servants have been in her house for a long time, the moment the servants leave the house, they are no more in Hannah's control. So, Hannah does not know how they are going to act, how they are going to react. So, she feels if any of the servants leak the news of the American who is being sheltered in their house, everybody in their house will be taken to task. On that very day, a messenger arrives at Sadao's residence, informing him that the old general is in pain again. Sadao pays a visit to one of his most powerful patients, the general, who struggles with his critical health problem. The general is fiercely loyal to Sadao, believing him to be the best doctor in Japan. Now, if you try to link the whole scenario, the servants have just left and there is a messenger from the general's house who has knocked on Dr. Sadao's door. obviously everybody in the house will think maybe the servants have already leaked the news that there is an American who is being sheltered in their house. But to everybody's surprise, the messenger is here to send for Dr. Sadao. He is called because the general is in pain. And Sadao goes to pay a visit to his most powerful patient, he says, and the general is struggling with his critical health. He is extremely loyal to Dr. Sadao because he knows that Dr. Sadao is the best doctor and he is the only one who can possibly save him. And maybe that is precisely the reason why he has not sent Dr. Sadao at the war front. He has kept him safely in Japan because whenever he feels the need, whenever his health goes a little downhill, he can always send for Dr. Sadao. Because of this bond the men share, Sadao confides in him about Tom. Like Sadao and Hannah, the general also attended college in the United States. So he understands Sadao's impulse to help the American even though he is an enemy. So students, here you can find a similarity between three characters. You have Dr. Sadao, you have Hannah and you have the general. All these three characters have gone out of their comfort zone. They have left Japan, they have traveled to the US, they have studied there and they have returned to their homeland. So when Sadao narrates the entire incident about Tom to the general kind of understands him because the general also has been in a similar situation some years ago. So he understands that Dr. Sadao has tried to help out an American who is also an enemy, but Dr. Sadao is taken in a different manner by the general because the general is educated. He can understand that the doctor's prime responsibility is to help a patient. The general is mostly concerned that Sadao will be sentenced to death and thus unable to operate on the general in the future. The general comes up with a plan. He will send his private assassins to Sadao's house sometime in the next week. Sadao is to leave the door to Tom's room unlocked. In the middle of the night, the assassins will silently kill the white man and dispose of the body, lifting the burden from Sadao's shoulders. So here students, it is made very evident that Sadao is Sadao is being saved by the general because of his own selfish motives. You can see here the general is concerned about Sadao because if Sadao is sentenced to death, there will be no person, there will be no doctor in Japan who can carry out a surgery on the general and he will never be saved. So the general now comes up with a plan that he will have his private assassins. Now an assassin is a person who commits a murder, especially one who murders a politically important person, or an assassin is a person who carries out a murder for another politically important person. So here you have the assassin who is going to kill the enemy for the general. So the assassin is going to work on the rule or on the order of the general. So the general's plan is very clear. The assassins will come to will go to Sadao's house. Sadao is supposed to leave the door open so that the assassins can have an easy access to Tom's room. They will come maybe during the middle of the night and they will silently kill the man and they will also dispose the dead body. Now disposing the dead body could be another problem for Sadao. Even if Sadao had to kill the man during the surgery, what would he possibly do with his dead body? So the general's idea of sending assassins and also disposing of his body is just a perfect solution for Sadao. And Sadao is really happy because there is no more burden in his mind any longer. Sadao begins thinking further about his duty as a husband. So Tom's presence in the house makes Hannah extremely anxious, and it is Sadao's responsibility to do what he can to lessen her anxieties. However, this is at odds with his duty as a doctor, which is to care for the man. Over and over, Sadao finds himself in the position of having conflicting duties which show the irrationality of all the characters who define duty in a straightforward and ideological way. So now students, here we have seen Dr. Sadao's duty as a Japanese citizen. As a Japanese citizen, he is supposed to do justice to his motherland. As a surgeon, he is supposed to save an ailing person, and as a husband, it is his duty to keep his wife happy and relaxed. So now comes in the picture his duty as a husband, and he is trying to think what could he do to lessen the burden on his wife. So he feels that it is the decision that he has taken of allowing the general to send his assassins in order to kill the enemy is but the best decision, which will certainly lessen the burden from his wife's head too. So Sadao desperately waits for 3 nights, hoping that the assassins will show up. His worry is at the peak, which makes him restless and helpless too. Finally, there comes a touch of reason. So students, in the previous slide I told you how selfish the general has been. The general wants to safeguard Dr. Sadao only because Dr. Sadao is the best doctor in Japan who can save him from his ailments. Now what happens is, Dr. Sadao realizes that there are no assassins who are showing up. So he has been waiting desperately for the past 3 days, not a single assassin shows up, and maybe now he feels that he will have to take some decision, he will have to make a choice in order to safeguard himself and in order to keep his wife happy and peaceful. And let us see what he decides to do. Tired of waiting, Sadao haughtily says, otherwise it's obvious to both Tom and the reader that Sadao is inexplicably committed to saving Tom. Sadao claims that Tom's presence is inconvenient. Now, students, there is a way of how you put things across. So Sadao is telling his enemy, he is telling his patient that you are now fit, you are now in good health, and your presence is getting too inconvenient for all of us in the house. So Sadao comes up with a plan. The plan is that Sadao sends Tom to a nearby island with his own flashlight, boat, supplies and clothing in the middle of the night, where he is bound to be picked up by a Korean fishing boat. He tells Tom to flash his flashlight at dusk if he runs out of food before being picked. So Sadao has been desperately waiting for the assassins to be sent by the general, but the general has not done anything, or we don't know why the assassins have not reached Sadao's house. So Sadao now wants to be a dutiful husband, and he decides that he is going to get rid of Tom. He tells Tom that I will send you to a nearby island, and he packs him up with the required supplies. He packs him up with clothes, he gives him his own boat, and he also gives him his own flashlight, and he tells him that there would be Korean fishing boats, which could help you reach to the safest place. And he also tells Tom, so this last part tells you how very worried and how very kind a human being Dr. Sadao is, because Dr. Sadao tells him, if you are running out of food, if there is no food that you have, when there is absolute dark, that is the time when you are going to flash the flashlight and I will send you food supplies. So students, here you can understand that Dr. Sadao has been a dutiful doctor, a dutiful husband, and let us see whether he is a dutiful Japanese citizen or no. A few days later, Sadao tells the general that Tom has escaped. The general guiltily realizes that he forgot to send the assassins in the first place. He had been so wrapped up in his own fragile health that he forgot to help Sadao. So can you understand? I was just telling you how selfish the general was. And this is again an example for all of us that the general is only thinking about himself. He has forgotten to send the assassins, although he had promised Dr. Sadao that he would send assassins. So he forgets to send the assassins, and the general hastily makes sure that Sadao doesn't think him any less patriot or dutiful for forgetting to have the white man killed. So, you know, this very sentence tells you how very patriot he is about Japan. So, you can understand, you know, even if the general is ill, if he was really bound to his motherland, if he was closely knit to his motherland, he would have gone out of his way to get the enemy disposed of. He would have done whatever was possible for him to kill the enemy. But the general forgets about the enemy and about Dr. Sadao too. The two men both promise to keep quiet about the whole situation. So now both the men understand that it is no use talking about it because the American has already left. If they talk about it, what will happen? Both of them are going to be guilty. So they decide to keep quiet, and after the Americans leave, all the servants return. This is a sign that things are getting normal at Sadao's residence. Yumi rushes to rid the room and house of any trace of the white man, which is a way to preserve Japanese purity. So you can understand, once things come back to normal, all the servants come back home. So this is again a sign that the American was the one who was creating a lot of problem and a lot of commotion in Dr. Sadao's house. So the moment the American is gone, the servants come back, and Yumi is the one lady who had who had decided that she is going to disobey the order of her mistress to clean the white man. She now rushes into the same room to clean the room really well because she does not want any trace of the white man to be left in that room. Sadao remembers his anatomy professor with all of the Americans he is disliked over his lifetime. Sadao remembers his words, mercy with the knife. Even though Sadao himself has shown mercy with the knife towards Tom, perhaps he considers this another reflection of Americanness. Now, you know, students, when you travel, when you leave your comfort zone behind and you travel to a different place, you have to adjust, you have to get used to that new place. So here, Sadao, being a Japanese, traveled to America, and maybe he had quite a few tips. You know, he was not really happy with the way he was being treated in America. So he remembers his anatomy professor and he remembers his words, mercy with the knife. So Sadao has been very merciful with his knife when it came to Tom, and he has saved Tom's life. Next, Sadao is most critical of his landlady in America, who was the only landlord willing to take on a Japanese tenant, though Sadao implies that she did have initial hesitations. So students, I was just telling you, when you travel, when you go to a different place, you need to look up for accommodation. Now since Sadao traveled to America, he had to look up for a place to stay. So he stayed with this landlady of his, and this landlady initially was very hesitant of giving him the accommodation, but later on she decided to give the accommodation to Sadao. Sadao depicts the landlady of being generally kind, if somewhat unrefined, which makes her seem undeserving of his harsh and antagonistic words. So, when Sadao had fallen ill when he was in America, he was nursed by his landlady. So, he does not have too many harsh words coming out of his way for her, but yes, he feels bad that initially she was hesitant of giving him the accommodation. He now thinks about Tom, white and repulsive face, and seems genuinely puzzled as to why he let Tom to live. So now students, he talks about his experience in America. He talks about two characters with whom he has spent quite a bit of time in America, and lastly now he is thinking of Tom. He is still puzzled, and he can't understand what really gets into him and why he has saved Tom. The story resists a clean ending, suggesting instead that Sadao is a deeply nuanced human character with a capacity for both cruelty and kindness. Now, Sadao is a person who possesses both emotions. He is cruel and he is kind too. You can see, he feels in a different manner for his anatomy professor who is an American. He feels differently for his landlady, and he feels exactly different for the American soldier or the sailor who is Tom. So, he feels that he was extremely kind to the American Tom. Though he has returned to his biased mindset, his actions over the course of the story give readers hope that he will turn towards kindness again. So, as you go through the story, you are certainly going to realize that from cruelty, there has been a total shift that has come in Sadao, and he is now getting kind. Maybe he will get more kind in the years to come. So, that is all about the chapter, students. Let us look at the main part of the chapter, that is the questions. Now, I had told you in the last classes that questions based on the supplementary reader allow you to use your imagination and answer the question. So, you have the first question there, use your imagination to suggest a different ending to the story, The Enemy. Now, there could be varied answers for this question. You could have the assassins coming into Dr. Sadao's house. Instead of killing Tom, they could have killed the doctor himself. It could be possible that the assassins killed Tom. They took the body away, but while they were taking the body away, they were spotted, okay, and there was an inquiry that was carried out. Or you could have that Sadao himself decides to pack up, he decides to take his family and relocate to a different place, because everybody comes to know about the American prisoner who is there at his house. So, you could have different endings to the story. If you were Dr. Sadao, what would you have done about the American? Now, here again you can think what you could have done. Maybe there could be a doctor who would give a little more dose of some medication while he was being operated, and that could lead to the death of the American. It could be that you would save him by doing your duty, you would carry out the surgery, and later on you could hand him over to the authorities. So, this answer again you can decide which answer or how you would write the answer. If you were to face Dr. Sadao's dilemma, what would your decision be and why? Now, Dr. Sadao faces the dilemma whether to save the American or not. So, firstly you will have to decide whether you are in favor of supporting or of saving the American, or you are in support of killing the American. Accordingly, you will have to write down, you will have to support your answer. Dr. Sadao was compelled by his duty as a doctor to help the enemy. Now, here you can elaborate this answer in two different ways. we find that Dr. Sadao has been a responsible doctor. Okay, he has carried out his duty very well by working, by giving him the correct medication, by carrying out the required medical procedure on the enemy. He has risen above his profession. He has been an epitome of humanity. He has shown all of us that enmity does not exist. It is humanity which should be practiced. So that is all about the chapter, students. Thank you.
Prudent Scholars, powered by Lupin Pharmaceuticals.